lot of people have potential, but not everybody has the work ethic. So does the work ethic match all that? And are they as invested? Do they want it the way I want it? Because that's another thing. Some people, they won't take it a step further to figure out when things get tough.
Hey, what's going on? Welcome to the McCove Mindset Podcast. Today we're going to sit down with my friend DJ Davii. He's done everything. He's won Grammys, he's won Emmys, he's worked with Travis Scott, he's worked with Bad Bunny. He's the UFC DJ. This guy has done all types of things in the music industry, from brand deals to building his own studio. I'm really looking forward to this conversation in which we can really dive into how to become a full-time entrepreneur in the arts. As always, if you like what you're hearing, hit like, hit subscribe, leave a comment, and let me know what you think. Let's get to it. Thank you for coming on to the podcast, bro. Seriously, appreciate you being here. Davii. Why don't you let everybody know like who you are and what you've done?
I'm a producer, songwriter, an international DJ, and I started out as a musician playing piano professionally, around the world, touring, doing that. Started out in church, learned how to play a lot of instruments in between. Did that for about 7 years. Started producing and songwriting when I was 24. Been doing that for the last 8 years, so 32 right now. Along the way, I've helped break quite a bit of artists like Travis Green, and it's a big part of Molly Music's career as well, and Ty Dolla $ign, as well as Bad Bunny, and a bunch of other people. So won some Grammys, won some Emmys.
Did some things.
Yeah, worked on some TV shows like Billions, Big Bang Theory, a lot of TV shows like that. Succession currently. A lot of HBO and Showtime, as well as all the other networks. But that's kind of where I got my start, was in TV and HBO and Showtime, and then from there, it's been a whirlwind,
Right,
to say the least.
When you say you got your start like with TV and stuff, what was your first placement?
My first placement was on Operation Repo. So it was reality TV.
They taking your car.
Yeah, there was a lady in Miami. She was like going around, getting into fist fights with the, people and all that stuff. But yeah, I did a lot of cues for them, and then also, with your segue music and all that stuff for the people that don't know. And then I also did the theme song at one point when they wanted the theme song remade.
That's what's up. And
So those are the first ones.
Is that what really opened you up to being able to move on to HBO and stuff? Because Billions is a dope ass show.
Yeah, it didn't initially, because I knew nothing about the TV space. I kind of fell in it by luck. A friend of mine that she used to be in management was actually working at the network, and she was an assistant to the head of acquisitions, where they do green lighting and stuff. And she's the one who connected me with the music supervisor over there, and just so it didn't carry over directly, but it definitely did help to be able to get to those other things, because it gave a reference of like, okay, he understands format of TV and stuff like that. But what really got me to Billions was uh, I had a buddy of mine who, at the time, he was going underneath the name Eskimo, which is like his moniker. He was like a DJ that also did electronic music, and he kind of like fused electronics and orchestral together, and he would do like a lot of stuff like that. And he was the person who I knew that was a composer on Billions, and we had spoke, and I was like, man, I'd love to submit something, because he told me about the show, but it wasn't on the air just yet. So we spoke about it, and he was like, man, I need some like Kanye West sound and stuff and that kind of thing. So I was like, let me submit some stuff over. So he gave me the music supervisor's information, and so goes the story.
That's what's up, man. So like I mean, obviously, because sync is like the buzzword right now. Post 2020, post 2020, sync is the buzzword. What, like a quick 1, 2, 3? What are like the top 3 things that you think people need to know about sync? And don't give me like the standard answers of like you gotta have your metadata in order, and you gotta make sure that you have the separated files. Like give me the real stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So the way for somebody if you mean from zero, like starting fresh from
Yeah, like
zero?
if you were interested in it, you've heard about it, but you were just like, I don't even know how to get into that.
Yeah. Yeah, so the way I would do it is the first thing I would recommend is to like consistently build catalog, in terms of, of course there's all the details of files and all that, but in terms of actually building catalog, like having that habit of saying, I'm going to take a very like calculated approach in terms of being able to say, here's, point one, two, and three. Meaning for me, when I thought about it back then, EDM and like epic style music was like a big forefront, and it still is till today, but not. There's a lot of other genres they're taking on these days too. But at that time, I approached it like if I'm making a Adele style ballad, I can take this a cappella and now make it an EDM record, so I can have kind of like do five records, but get 10 out of the five, so that once I have those five, and I set my bar low. I set it to like one five songs per quarter. Because I was still working with artists and stuff. So I feel that, catalog is one thing, just having like an advantage approach, because usually they don't want to wait. They're like, hey, we got 12 hours a day, or, if you're lucky, they'll give you a couple days, but usually it's like 4 to 12 hours, so small windows, and, you just need readily available music. It's hard to create that successfully and feel good about it. Like all of us who have doubts on the mix and all that stuff. So to me, catalog is one. Number two would be uh, um, the network of it all, which there's two initial, places that I would say go, which is IMDb Pro, which, IMDb regular is like the 30,000 square foot view of like, you're in the rafters looking at the industry, versus IMDb Pro subscription, like 10 or $15 a month. And essentially gives you a lot of agents and different people's information. And the third thing would be is don't spam them, because they're just not going to want to read your emails. But I would say, um, to go a little bit deeper into that, is just making sure that um, from that standpoint, you actually know their work, you know what they do, you know the things that they want to say, and you're like well educated in the sense of you can let them know, hey, I'm a, have the ability to clear this. The paperwork's already done, everything's already clear. I have, the kind of music that you generally use on your TV shows and like that, or films. And then from that standpoint, you can build a rapport, and they won't probably answer back in the first 3 months, because they're not allowed to. Generally they have like a non-soliciting clause in their contracts for different shows they're doing, so they'll get to know you, and then they'll bring you on their next project. But those are the three things I would say um, would be the main pieces.
Word. And then what about if you wanted to work with artists? Because you list some artists that you would work with too. Like if you're a producer, you're a
Mhm.
songwriter, and you're like, man, I got some dope tracks, but how do I get them to how do I get them to an artist if I'm an independent writer or if I'm an independent, producer?
Yeah, so there's a couple ways. The easiest way to me is working directly with management if their management isn't like completely inundated. We're talking about the biggest artists like a Drake or Post Malone, whoever the case. Those guys would be very inundated with a lot of different things. But if you're talking about somebody who hasn't hit to that stature, then generally you can get a hold of their managers pretty decently. You just got to look around and their website, Instagrams, whatever, figure out who their teams are, because all of them have different teams. But the easier of the ways would be to actually reach out, because you can find all the credits for the most part on Spotify. So just look on the credit section of Spotify and start hitting those guys up. Those guys tend to, if you learn their process, you tend to see where you can bring them efficiencies. So like that. If one of them they're not good with melodies and you're a musician, you can provide that. Or if you're a top liner, that can just write hooks for them all day, and you just can send them hooks and they can attach that to their records, whatever the case is. Or if they can send you stuff back, if they trust you that way, then you know they'll be able to do that. So I think that's probably of the easier ways to do it. um just to clarify, for me, I started out by actually breaking my own artist, which um, was a whole different approach.
So what's that like?
That's hard because it's not simple. Because I at the time I didn't know I had the chops, because playing for all these major acts on the road, I definitely had the chops in terms of understanding, you know, what's a good singer, crowd control, are they compelling, are they a draw, could they even be a draw, do they have this potential? And a lot of people have potential, but not everybody has the work ethic. So does the work ethic match all that? And are they as invested? Do they want it the way I want it? Because that's another thing. Some people, they won't take it a step further to figure out when things get tough. So those guys, they had that, and then after that, it was a lot of just grinding. Doing the initial legwork for running a region. Because both of them were in the South. Primarily between Georgia and North Carolina. So for me, I was able to look at the whole region and then say, okay, here's different places they can hit that are venues that already do what they do. These guys already got budget. It's just a matter of showing them enough in the, like, snippets of their new music, and then like some, shows that they've already done, more or less, that I could have based off of relationships in the tour space, just gotten them little things here and there. And videotaped it, and not professionally, just on an iPhone, camera phone, this kind of thing, just sitting there, somebody, doing that whole thing, and then basically sending that out and reaching out to a lot of promoters in those areas. And that was kind of like the initial of that, in terms of getting them to the first space. Because once they got enough clout in those areas, um, thankfully, because of BMI, we were able to do some stuff for them, and in terms of performances for events they had, and they're the ones who actually put us in communication with some of these record labels.
So you recommend really utilizing the resources that the PROs have to offer, like all those different like meetups and songwriting rounds and stuff.
Yeah, I do recommend it. I think it's just a matter of taking a tactical approach, because there's always like the network with your peers, network with the people on the panel, but they always have somebody who's the event coordinator, and that's who we were networking with. We were like, we want to be the opening act at this stuff, and the person who's making those decisions are ultimately the PRO and the person putting together the event. So just having that awareness, I think, is important to take advantage of that. And then of course them seeing you be serious as well, and honestly, a lot of it was just like a lot of a la carte commission based work for everybody, so whether it been assistants, managers, everything like that, all of them were like all commission based, and they were used for different things, whatever their expertise was or whatever they were really trying to build in. That's where we generally had a mutual interest in working together, so that would be to me the way to do it, because if that person understands that there's not a weekly check attached to this, because there really is no real cash flow coming in, but they believe in it and they see something for themselves in this industry, where they feel like those connections are going to be as value to them later on in the future, then you have a good thing, I think, in that situation.
So that leads me to another question, because you just said like commission based. How did you orient yourself to figure out like, oh, there's stuff that you can get commissioned to do? Because everybody's trying to figure out, how can I perform and make money? How can I, set myself up with something where I can get paid? So yeah,
Yeah.
how did you orient yourself towards the commission based work?
It kind of started out as a musician, because being, especially in the local circuit, you generally make, I don't know, back then we were making between 150 and 500 per gig. And that's just being, bars, lounges, um, churches, all kind of stuff like that, of all sorts, whether it be Catholic or whatever the case is. So needless to say, each of those, kind of had that. And basically it kind of started out because what would happen is you play at a venue, and the owner sometimes would be like, hey, do you know a manager, promoter, or somebody that could bring in more talent? And you'd be like, oh yeah, bring in so and so, they do great as well. And then it's like, well, how do I get in contact? It's like, you know what, just I'll call them up, and you'd see musicians start to like take 5%, 10% of whatever, and they just kind of manage the relationship, since they were introducing somebody new. So they just kind of stayed on top of it in terms of they didn't per se put them in a management situation, but they would manage that venue essentially to bring in whatever talent. So since the owner was already inundated with the bar and all the restaurant assets during the day and stuff, it kind of takes off that pressure. So naturally, most musicians would just be like, "Oh yeah, I'll get you over at blah blah blah," and they get us 5-10% or whatever. But bands usually are between 15 and 2 grand, for the night, and they're doing a lot of covers, top 40, that kind of thing. So essentially, it kind of came from that was just looking at it the same way, like, hey, you kind of eat what you kill. And most agents they're under that kind of thing because most booking agents they do a lot of eating what they kill and stuff like that. So from that standpoint, it's just doing it at a micro level, because those guys do it at a much bigger level, But this is kind of just doing it on a local level. So a lot of time, that's how I got started in that as well, But today, people will call for big artists, and I'll still, make a commission on some of that stuff as well. And it's just kind of transpired to the more I elevated and the more my network got more vast, the more I was like, but it's one of those things where I've never personally been like a huge stickler on the exact percentage, because it's kind of one of those things where I don't want to mess up an opportunity for somebody as well. So I find it important to be able to um, remain flexible. If it ends up being 2%, I'm not losing sleep over that as well. Just because, one, that's not my primary form of income, but then two, um, to me, the money generally tends to be the lower hanging fruit of the situation. And when I need a favor, I'm going to want to cash in on that
Right.
extra, percentage I didn't make in whatever favor I ask. So it ends up helping build like, a lot of great relationships along the way because they see like, okay, he didn't make money on this one, but he made money on these other three, or they'll catch you up on a different one because they know that, that one you didn't get paid on may have helped them lock down those other ones. And naturally, if they like you, they'll do it. And if not, you just have a way to say, hey, I got you this one, and you got those other five from it. I need this favor, and you can, cash in that way as well.
Word. Yeah, I love that. What you're essentially saying is like you had a skill set that you applied at like a very,
Yeah.
local level, and then just
Mhm.
continue to kind of graft that skill set as you continue to move up. It's
Yeah.
so because I'm curious, like, how did you end up working with like hip hop and rappers and R&B guys when you're an EDM DJ?
Yeah. So, that actually came about from me not wanting to live in Miami and or so I love Miami and it's home, grew up in Florida. And for me I just got tired of I think every scene has a unless you're I'm in Los Angeles now, so unless you're like out in LA where everything exists at the same time, you find that certain regions do different things and even though there is great hip hop in Miami is not a hip hop driven market per se. It's a more Latin driven market. So um, basically, I moved to Atlanta and I just made it a point to connect within the producers that I'd met throughout the years in Miami that had because there's a good amount of them who live in Atlanta now, so I would connect with those guys and start to kind of make my rounds around the Atlanta area. And I moved over there. And that's really how I got into it was by doing a lot of collaborations with those guys. And then, still reaching out to the same um, executives that I knew because the initial label I got them, my first two artists signed with was RCA Records. So RCA I was able to reach out to them and they still had, a lot of different like R&B and, as well as hip hop artists, and, I was able to go to them directly and just be like, I see you guys signed Bryson Tiller. I'd love to work with him,
Right.
and through just, good performance on the music that I'd already done before, since it did so well, they were like, absolutely, we'd love for you to be able to work with them. Um,
X too. I didn't even mean to cut you off, but like I saw on the Instagram the other day, you had posted just like some throwback clips and stuff that you was cutting, and I'm like, I didn't know
yeah,
you could sing. Okay,
yeah,
I see you. You was out there singing.
yeah. Yeah, so that actually came by just loving making records. And what it was is that um because I had such a high expectation from being a musician, locally I was highly picky. There wasn't a lot of impressing me, just because of the amount of people that, I had worked with in the past. It was just like really hard to, see a rapper and you're like, okay, I've worked with B.O.B. as a musician. This is not that. So you kind of have an idea of a caliber you enjoy operating under, I guess to say. And for me, I just enjoyed it so much, and I knew that in the studio I could deliver. Yeah, I went. Well, what it was, I went from Miami to Atlanta, and I was reaching out to all the different, people that I knew in the industry in terms of, producers, songwriters, executives, people like that. And that's how I got into it because, Atlanta is very much. I knew I was going into like an urban market. I knew this isn't the market for pop, or this isn't a market for country, or none of that. I knew if I wanted a country, I go to Nashville, which was like 4 hours away. But in terms of that, and not that those guys can't do it because they're all incredible and they have the ability to make pop records and all that stuff. But primarily, the market itself is a urban market when it comes to hip hop and R&B. So I knew that kind of submerging myself in the heart of it would make the biggest difference in the world.
Word. So, cause I'm curious then too, like DJing and getting into that EDM space and stuff. Is that what led you to DJing like for the UFC events, or was that completely just happenstance?
Yeah, no, it led to that because like any DJ, you start out by, there's like management type agencies that are usually localized where, they might run a certain region, or they might just have certain contracts, like they'll have like, in Florida they'd have like, the Hard Rock Hotel and the Blue Martini and like franchises and chains and stuff so they could have, work that they could facilitate throughout their agency. And basically, I knew that I wanted to sign to an agency, but um, being a producer and a songwriter kind of opened that door for me because a lot of the guys in the space, and this is 2014, a lot of them they were still making their own stuff, but they were just trying to buy themselves time. Like they couldn't continue to do 200 days a show, I mean 200 days a year, and all those shows and still like sit down all the time and make music and stay competitive. It's like their energy was just a lot. They had to be doing press and talking to other DJs for radio, some of them and stuff like that. So they just had a lot of airtime and stuff like that, and they just always were trying to find out ways. So it kind of naturally made it easy for me to be able to say, hey, I can help you guys out and stuff like that. And back then there was Beatport. I'm sure they still do, but Beatport they used to do like remix competitions and stuff like that. So that's how I got known into the space because they would just upload all the files of a song that they wanted you to potentially look at remixing. So that's how I got well known to the space, just submitting into remixes, and people were like, "Man, this guy sounds like a commercial." Radio kind of guy, so a lot of the bigger DJs they appreciated um, they appreciated my ability to have like a commercially palatable product. And that's how I got started in that space. But initially I was signed to Mad Decent, which is Diplo's like, agency. And then after that I was signed to CAA. And then CAA eventually, I ended up at WME because it ended up being more of a better fit. So for me, it was kind of one of those things where it naturally suited me for all the things that I do, but all those agencies are incredible places and I have nothing but great things to say about them.
That's what's up. As you
Yeah.
saw me crack the joy burst,
Yeah.
you know, right? Because this podcast is sponsored by Joy Burst, the energy drink,
Absolutely.
and it's really the
Absolutely.
Joy Burst talent competition, which could be open to
Hmm.
DJs, because essentially what it is that you enter the competition, the Joy Burst talent search, you get an opportunity to win 10,000 cash, a song publishing deal, and there are some
Hmm.
sync opportunities that are tied to that as well. And so if you go online, go to joyburst.com, you can check the talent search, do your submission via TikTok or Instagram, and enter for your chance to win. It kind of makes me think about the conversation that you and I had about your studio. And you were explaining to me, like, in your studio, how you have some sponsorships with some alcohol companies and stuff. So, like,
Hmm.
indie artists are always looking for ways to do things. I know I've spoken about this, like how, hey, how I got a sponsor for this podcast and stuff. How did you go
Yeah.
about getting sponsorship opportunities for like your recording space and different stuff?
Yeah, so that was an education in the Atlanta area, you know. Um, so in Atlanta, you go to like Stankonia and you see, major corporations that, it's like they got this giant bar of just, 2 stories of like, all these different alcohol corporations. And some of them were, vehicle corporations, some of them are, um, a lot of that. And what I was finding out was a lot of those studios were actually they were building them and fronting the money, and one of the ways they were getting their money back was by allowing for those corporations to essentially come in and sponsor them, and in trade they would be able to do events and all that stuff like that. And timing is a big piece of that one, and where a lot of them capitalizes on sporting events, because naturally there's always going to be different sporting events in major markets, which Atlanta, they have a sizable set of teams that exist there between the Falcons and the Atlanta Hawks and stuff like that. So naturally, I saw how those guys were moving, and they were really getting a lot of those big ones. Like, hey, Super Bowl's coming. We'll go ahead and let you guys sponsor this, and in turn, you could do your after party here at the facility. So that was something that kind of intrigued my interest because I was like, man, these guys are investing 300 grand and 2 and 3xing on their endorsement deals, over the years, they would just, they didn't necessarily have to just make money on being a studio owner or renting studio time or any of that stuff or renting out equipment, naturally as studios do. So from that standpoint, they were like just all of them, every single one of them. You're like, this is this, this is this cognac or this is this vodka or this, tequila or this, you're like, or this vehicle, company, and stuff like that. So you're like, and some American, some overseas, and all that stuff. But ultimately, they were getting all these companies where you could naturally see like this is a business for them, and they were constantly, and it just widened their network. Constantly having energy drink companies like, Joy Burst, where they come in and naturally, they have a setup, and they can constantly, have events there and stuff like that when they're the city. So me, I got into it because in LA is not half as common. And two, LA is like very unassuming in terms of, in Atlanta, you pull up to the studio and you understand this is a studio facility. Like for the most part, they seem like buildings that studios should be in. When you come to LA, everything's very, it looks like a warehouse in the middle of nowhere sometimes. And it's like the greatest studio inside. You go inside and it looks like it's a spaceship, lights, LEDs, all the, the works. But outside it just looks like a, industrial complex, so,
Right.
and it's a lot of that, So for me, and, having this as a studio, I knew that, I wanted to be able to bring something different to the market, but I knew, there was challenges as well, with safety concerns and stuff like that. So naturally, what I did was I got a high rise, and I decided because they already have the parking and the security and the, it's only like certain floors that, elevator access will grant and stuff like that. So everybody else on all the other floors remain safe and stuff like that. Unless somebody goes in the stairwell, but I don't foresee somebody walking up 24 flights of stairs and remaining a very happy
Right.
person. so,
Gassed
so from that
out. Like,
standpoint, yeah, and I've done it. I've done it unfortunately when the one time the elevators here got, they got messed up and I had to do some work in here, and yeah, I was in the eighth floor like you know
how many more steps?
Yeah, I was like every 8 floors, I was like, okay, this is my first round, my second round, my third round, my fourth round. By the time I got up here, I was like, it's time to take a bath, you know. But I had the body spray just everywhere. But needless to say, yeah, that was a concern with safety. And then just providing something that didn't feel as dungeon driven, and still honoring all the like laws of acoustics and things that it takes to run a studio. And really my inspiration for this place was Jungle Studios in New York, because most of the studios in New York, they're kind of in different places, but Jungle is kind of like the first high-rise studio. When you go in it, you're like whatever 50, 60 floors up, and you see the whole city, and it's really inspiring. But they captured a way to get a good sound in there. So um I wanted to task myself with bringing something similar to the city. And in return, because this place is pretty much full of glass on the outer walls. um the event corporations, they love it because they can bring all their people in, and bartenders, and there's DJ there, all the equipment is here too. So
Right.
they can bring DJs, and DJs can just pull up and do their thing. And it's a really nice situation. And there's a B room with a like editing bay, essentially, where there's people who make songs in there, but primarily what goes on there is audiobooks. So but yeah, we decided, or I should say I decided, to reach out to different alcohol corporations and that I knew throughout DJing and stuff like that, and start to be able to get endorsements with those guys.
So what was for you? What was like your process of reaching out? Did you already have an established
Yeah,
relationship with them, or was
I
it
already
cold?
yeah, I already had an established relationship, but I'll say this, I still did it cold as well. So, I should say this, can I say the corporations' names?
Yeah, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, okay, okay. So I knew if it was like Diageo, I had relationships over there because Diageo owns, um tons of they have over 200 brands. So anything Smirnoff, Johnny Walker, Grey Goose, Belvedere, they have a large list. So I knew that with my contact over there, it would be easy just because we already had a standing relationship. But when it came to like Beam Santori, who has like Maker's Mark, whiskey, they have Jim Beam, they also have F and vodka. I knew with them, I didn't have a big rapport with them. So I went on LinkedIn and found the marketing, the chief of marketing, and reached out and, hit them up cold, and they gave me their email, and we had a couple conversations. I told them my idea in the email, and essentially we got on some Zoom calls and we established a relationship like that. Um, but yeah, I think Jesus, there's like a bug in there. My apologies. I'm like seeing it in the video, and I'm like, how did this even get in
They
here?
finna
This
roast
place
you on
just got,
YouTube. YouTube is gonna
yeah,
be going ham on you.
yeah, this place just got like a deep clean too. It's upsetting, but anyway,
It's all the spilled alcohol. Like,
yeah, it's all the spilled alcohol for sure, and people leaving food around. But yeah, basically, I hit up, those guys, and essentially so I hit up Beam Santori, and Beam Santori essentially, they reciprocated. And I didn't hit them up saying I'm Grammy Award winning, Emmy this, whatever. I already have an EPK that says that stuff. So for me, I hit them up and I say, hey, I'm a business owner. I work in the entertainment industry, and I think there's many different ways we could, do a lot of business together that would be mutually beneficial, and I think we should get on a phone call and have a conversation. And I just attached my EPK, said this is who I am and some of the work that I've done. And from that standpoint, go from there. And I also have other people who are in events through, and that's why I think it's good to get to know a lot of events people, because those guys naturally have those contacts. And if you can find a way to, let them gain a commission, and kind of circumvent the cold calling process as well, that's another way. And you'll know they have those relationships because generally you'll see, oh, this is presented by, and whatever alcohol corporation, and they'll have that stuff. But I wouldn't necessarily build with them for the purpose of, brand endorsements. I would actually build with them for the purpose of, solidifying a lot of cool events. And then, through meeting a lot of them, you'll see who's kind of like got the bigger, Rolodex of, brand relationships. Because some of them, they'll just do one and one only. And then some of them really do every corporation when it comes to brand endorsements and stuff like that. Like, I got a couple ladies where they any industry, anytime, any place, any part of the year, they understand what's going on in the market and who has budget and who doesn't, and they can figure that stuff out. So I think it is great the cold call, but I think as well as that, being able to network with individuals who put on a lot of events and stuff like that.
Word. Yeah, I think that like everybody would like to know, how do you get started in facilitating some of those relationships, right? Like if I'm a artist or a songwriter or a DJ or anything,
Yeah.
and so much of our conversation is based on having relationships, but
Hmm.
how do you how do you build them? Was it just like you were out a lot, you were performing a lot, you're like you're social, so you were making a lot of friends, it's easy for you, like?
Yeah, so there's a couple components to me. So I'm actually very introvert, like very extroverted. I'm sorry. I'm very extroverted. I'm not like a introverted person. There's my times I want to be alone, but that's far few in between. But there's that component for me, and then I understand business. So there's another component to who I am is that, like just numbers, that kind of thing, just, what goes on, what shouldn't go on, stuff like that. Or, just like throughout the years, learning through mistakes how to do that. And, with podcasts like this, and, there's tons of business ones. Back then there was no podcast. So it was all learning, through the school of hard knocks,
Right.
so those two things were there. And then literally just being a performer. But really, even if I would go to those, events, a lot of time those people tend to actually be very introverted 9 times out of 10. Like they're very much like, I put this on, I do this, I do that. And they just kind of sit back and drink their mimosas and just make sure things are going well.
I love
And
how
you
you
have,
said mimosas. It's like that is what it is though. Like
yeah, it just seems like they all love
it's something
mimosas
about
or
the orange
martinis.
juice. Like,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, they got their vitamin C. But yeah, they do that, and so while everybody's performing, you see the big lights and the who's who of everything. I would be looking for like who's the event coordinator, who's the promoter, who's actually the puzzle piece maker. Like who's putting the pieces of the puzzle together to like make this a really successful event. So from that standpoint, that's something that, I kind of started taking, I guess you could say, somewhat pride in, just to see like, okay, who does this.
it's like a
So that was
radar.
one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you gotta
yeah, it
develop
was.
like
It
a
was like,
radar. Like that
yeah.
person right there, that's the one.
Well, I'll give y'all a gem. The gem is this: is that usually they have their own section. So usually there's like they'll usually call like the chairman's lounge or the stuff like that. You know what I mean? Or executives lounge or VIP lounge, because you got the regular like VIP stuff, but this one will be like directly for the people who work at this event. And usually they're not like directly up in the front, but they're not far in the back. Usually they tend to be somewhere in the middle. But I would kind of spot them pretty easily because the people who usually put that on, they're not at all enthused by the event. They're pretty much like, you could tell work mode is existing, like, oh, this is wrong. And they're like, they usually have people that they're like texting and they're always like, doing this horror deal, like,
Right.
just nonstop. And, so you could see like because their mind, they're not like enthused because their mind is so like running on like, okay, all this is good, but what's messed up? What's like, they're always trying to, in real time, do a lot of troubleshooting, so from that standpoint, I would spot them very easily just because I knew, okay, you're not going to be too far up in the front because you don't want to be by because those are also the money spots. The closer you are, the more people are paying. So they're like, nah, we don't want to absorb money. We want to absorb this area for just people to, if I want to, if they want to run around and yell at somebody, they can. So from that standpoint, I developed and you'll see if you spot them and you sit there long enough, you'll see them cursing at people and just, they're just in the stress of it all, they're usually pretty candid, but then when you see them as people, you're like, hey, my name's, Navi Davi, this is what I do. I think it would be great to just, be able to get your information. I know this isn't the place to talk business right now, but if we could, swap information, I'd love to hit you up and set up a meeting potentially and get to know you and your work. And then like that, naturally, you'll be able to establish that. And I'll give the biggest gem I think anybody can give. If they see that you are only 100% interested in business, because most of them are female, they will be 100% willing to pick up your phone call. But a lot of people come with like a dual
That
intent
wrong
of like,
energy.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's more than just business for them. So as long as people just say, let me, even in my wording, I think about how I approach them. Like I don't say, hey, if you got any free time, I ask, whenever you have availability, please let me know. Like certain, verbiage just to make sure that I don't even want the word free coming out of my mouth. You know
Right.
what I mean? Because I don't want them to feel that that I'm expecting anything for any type of, because, naturally we say that just because that's the way we speak, but in a professional setting, that may set off certain hints. So I actually think about what my pitch is. And sometimes I'll write it down on my phone in my notes and be like, nah, this isn't good enough. Let me like reword it. And I guess with the advent of Chat
I
GPT,
was
you
just
could
about to say that. I was gonna be like, yo, bro, you gotta use the chat GPT. How do I say this in a more have you started playing with it? You
like,
started using it?
yeah, yeah, I have. I have
Word.
actually. Like I actually did that. I told it to I said, draft up an SOP for this and draft up an standard operating procedure for these things, to make sure. And it gives probably like 80 to 90% accuracy, especially for the industry we're in. It's not going to be able to pull up every little nuance. But from that standpoint, it's about 80 or 90% right. So just to amend and be able to apply and have that on the even just my company for like when people do submissions or whatever, it's taken off a big workload. So I've used it for that so far. I've never tried it yet for creative work, but in terms of like the like an assistant, things like that, just good verbiage and stuff like that, or I'll like take an old email of what I knew worked and tell it to reword it so that I can have a better format, so stuff like that.
Word. Way to get
That's been
busy on it. When we had that chat and he was like, I haven't used it. I'm like, bruh, you missing out. It's a whole new world
Yeah,
out here. It's
yeah,
definitely
it's
different.
efficient. It's super efficient. Yeah, I think it'll probably honestly, it to me would shave down at least um 70, 80 hours of work, just using it intermittently, even if you're just like, I don't know how to just like ask it, it'll do it, and then you just amend it to what you want, and it'll save hundreds of hours. So it's incredible.
All right. So how many people ended up hitting up your status the other day when you was working with Travis?
Travis Scott, probably 700 or 800 people.
Yeah, I knew it
It
was
was,
gonna
it
be
was an
nutty.
influx. It was an influx. Those are all different situations. Like so, funny enough, we actually were in the studio to work on an even bigger artist project, and needless to say, he brought up his project and started wanting to talk about that. And he has really great stuff, and some of it's still really an experimental phase, in terms of what he's just because he's always trying to build something new. But yeah, it's really hard to be able to facilitate 800 people's desire to want to make music for a major artist like that. So
And that's normally how it goes though, right? Like normally it's wanting to make the quantum leap, right? Like I
mhm,
haven't written for anybody. If you were to search me on Spotify, I have no songwriting credits to trying to make the
yeah,
quantum leap to jumping up to writing for like an A-level artist. Like
yeah,
what do you suggest in terms of like if you wanted to stair step that approach, right? Like some real tacit,
yeah.
practical, applicable information that it's like, you know what, I do want to get to that stage, but I'm not there yet. So how do I begin the process of walking up the flights of steps?
Yeah, the actual way I would do it is I would actually hit up a lot of the labels indie departments, Def Jam, Universal, Sony, a lot of these guys like that. I would hit them up. A lot of their indie departments. And a lot of time, it's just like usually you can just go on Instagram and look at Sony Musics and who they follow. A lot of time they follow a lot of their own staff. So you'll find just through the investment of time, couple hours here and there, you'll be able to find a lot of the people who are doing stuff in their systems. And if they're not, you'll find somebody that they follow that they do know. Or, a lot of those guys are still on LinkedIn and all that stuff, so from that standpoint, there's a plethora of, relationship building tools, I guess to say, in social media. But I think the biggest thing that I would do is I would want to partner up heavily in that regard, because really those departments don't pay magnificent, but it'll pay a good living. It'll pay a solid living, not six figures, but close probably, and not to speak about their business, but they're always trying to figure out how to just do the minimum and get the maximum, value for their money, because they don't know if these artists are going to be anything. So they're trying to like figure out, like, kind of like a diversity and impact approach, where you're trying to see, okay, which one's going to make the most sense, and where do we shove the bigger budget in. But the reason why I'm saying that is because two things come of that. You end up incubating with them their bigger artists, for the next foreseeable 5 to 10 years, and you end up also being able to, the ones they drop, they usually have 2.5 year reversions on their, the masters and all the music that you did with them. So a lot of time you can use that for sync, and you inherently build catalog for being able to place in the future. So it's like your efforts don't really go ungarnered. Now how long they keep those artists depends on how they feel about the budget, but naturally, they'll be able to get out of situations, and 3 to 5 years down the road, you're like, oh, hey, this thing came up with Google, whatever the case is, and there you go. What you did 5 years ago now transacts today. So I think that's kind of where I would start. And if I didn't start there, I would just start exactly where I started from the beginning, which was
Right.
breaking artists. You know, and I wouldn't take the approach of, I wouldn't take the approach of, Web3 or any of that. I would actually just go old school. I would just look at what Barry Gordy did, and just, and not another one where, like, there's nothing wrong with all that stuff. Like, I would still encourage having those assets to be able to have on, Spotify and, iTunes, and still go to like all these like Web3 related NFT stuff and all any of the stuff you can use to your advantage. But to me, the bigger advantage would, how fast can I get this person moving on the road? Because being able to transact 50,000 in the next 6 months is very realistic, opposed to that stuff. It depends on how the market feels versus these businesses that already have preset allocated budget. So I would take the approach of like, I want to do that stuff, but let me get some cash flow first to be able to, put some of that money into that, as well as pay a little bit of bills, and start to make that transition into being a full-time, creative.
Word. That's beautiful. That's sage advice. Bro, I want to thank you for coming on to the podcast, for spending some time, and lending your insight into the industry. It's beautiful.
Absolutely.
I hope that, people value it. Is there any place where they can get in contact with you? Your Instagram, your YouTube, like, is there
Yeah.
any?
Yeah, my Instagram has all my contact information. Usually I have a, like a hyperlink, like Linktree, that kind of thing. And it'll just have like, you know, email, website, all that stuff. So usually that's the easiest way to get in contact with me, not my DMs. you know, that has
Says
become
slide
a
in.
circus.
Pause.
Yeah.
No, like-
Yeah, and not to break up the monotony of this, but I actually have a question for you.
yeah.
How did you get started in sync? I'm curious everybody's situation.
Yeah, for me it was my guy Ryan. So my partner Ryan Knock, he runs Knock It Out Music, who you got to chat with. Yeah, we started working together when I was young. Like, I was still in college, and when like I was doing the performer route and doing all of that stuff and still recording music, and he was producing a lot of my tracks. He was producing for other people too. He's out of New York, and he was pretty much just like, "Yo, this isn't gonna work. Trying to get rappers to pay me, like it's just is not gonna work." And he decided that he wanted to make the leap into being a producer full time, and he knew some people who were in music for television and advertising, and was just like, "Hey, I think that this is like a space to go into, to look into." And um, since he had produced so much stuff for me, he produced like virtually all of my work, just off of the strength. When
Mm,
he needed to build his catalog and he wanted songs, I was just like, "Oh, I'll write to anything." And so that's really how it kind of got started. I started to see briefs due to him trying to get into the space and then getting requests. And so that just through like the repetitions kind of developed my process for like, okay, this is what sync writing is. This is how it works. This is like how I should read these things and what they kind of mean. We were learning it at the same time. So I think it was, for me,
mm,
it was really good too to have somebody to just kind of converse with and bounce ideas off of. You also have like a
mm.
kind of like somebody whose opinion that you really value, who's going to keep it straight with you and be like, and that's not really that good, or like that hook's not, maybe you want to re-sing that, or and like, so you really start to develop like a craft for it. And so for me, yeah, that's really how I got started into it. It was about 2016, I think, when we really started to like do some stuff that was like getting placed and whatnot. And I was just like, yeah, this is cool. Like, it was cool. It didn't really hit me until about 2018. 2018, I moved to Baltimore and had kind of mentally made the decision that I wanted to stop performing out as much. Like, okay, I think I want to stop performing out as much, and I want to really like work on my pen. I want to get better at writing. And strangely enough, I got plugged in with this company called Jumping Giant, which specialized in like kids programming, and
Yeah.
wrote some songs for this thing called Alpha Friends, and did some letters and whatnot, and there was like animation that just ended up with it later. And when I saw the what it can become, like when I saw what sync can do, I was like, oh, this is definitely where I should probably focus a bit more of my attention. And then by
Yeah.
2020, what happened. 2020, everybody was in, and the
Mhm.
sync space kind of exploded. And fortunately, we were kind of already in that space, like we were already in there, and Ryan had done a terrific job of kind of positioning himself and his company in like a really great place. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
really how I got started in it.
Man, that's dope. So I got a question. Was there any different approach that you took during the pandemic?
All right, so like kind of maybe sort of
Yeah,
during.
because like it's like you're already in, so you have like a process, but was there like somewhat of any pivots or any small increments?
Well, for me, honestly, the pandemic really psychologically affected me. So
Mm,
for like I was kind of in a creative rut,
mm,
like cuz I'm more of an extrovert. So I get a lot of energy. I get kind of charged up by being around people and having conversation and stuff, and that wasn't
yeah,
happening. Like none of that was happening. So it's like no new ideas, no new experiences. It's just like the same day on
yeah,
repeat. And I think creatively that was it was killing me. And
mm,
fortunately, I guess it was around April, Ryan and I had worked on this song called Saving Us, which was it
mm,
was like a tribute song to frontline workers. And we ended up working with another artist, John Thomas, which I ended up finding out later when we were on the phone that he used to be in this band called Lipstick Gypsy. And
man,
I was a fan of that band. Like I was like, "Yo,
mm,
you're the guy from Lipstick Gypsy. Like I saw you on Good Morning America. I literally did. Like years prior, I saw this guy
yeah,
on Good Morning America and immediately started following their music because he killed it.
yeah,
It turned out that he ended up you're working with us on this song. He was the vocalist, and I did background vocals, and the song kind of gave a little lift of new life, even in the sync space, because we ended up getting linked up with this gentleman, David Abelson. He worked for ABC 2020, and so the song itself got to be featured in this thing that they were doing called Corona Hustle. It was like the theme
Mhm.
song for that. And we had like a little viral campaign. People Magazine, like did a story on it and
Yeah.
stuff. And it's that like gave me the little spark that said like, okay, get back into writing, get back into doing some stuff.
Mhm.
And about top of 2021, which was like kind of like that weird period where everybody was kind of like, are
Yeah.
we out of the pandemic? Are we in the pandemic? Like, what are we doing? Are we outside? Are we inside? So we're
Yeah.
like in that weird flux, and opportunities started to like really roll in.
Mhm.
Even during the pandemic in 2020, during that
Yeah.
summer, I don't know if you remember or if it was like this where you were, but there was like a month where it was like pandemic's over, you can go outside. It was in the summer, and then it was like never mind, we lied, that's not what happened. um and
Yeah.
I did a show opening for Jimmy Allen,
Mm.
big country artist,
Yeah.
and I think he won CMA Country Artist of the Year. And so that also gave me like a little bit of like a
Mhm.
rejuvenation. I was like, okay, cool, I'm still in this. This is still a thing. And by the time all the other streaming platforms came out, your Paramount Plus and your HBO Max and Discover
Yeah.
Plus, and while everybody entered the streaming space, and there was
Mhm.
so much program. I felt like there was a hiatus, like there was nothing for a little bit, and then it was like a levee broke, and it was just a
Yeah.
flood. And yeah, I think that we were just positioned very nicely to do well after that.
Yeah. So were you ever afraid that you wouldn't be able to do it again the same way at any point?
Yeah, yeah, because on actually during the pandemic, I developed some habits. Like I developed some habits, and I actually had caused some real serious damage to my vocal cords.
Man.
So like a lot of my range, tonal quality, like just it was work. It was real work to get back, and I
Yeah.
was like actually like really sad, like psychologically like sad. Like I didn't realize,
Mhm.
one of them things where it's just like you don't you don't value something until you lose it. And it's not that I
Yeah.
didn't value that I could sing. It's just that I had never not been able to sing to understand how valuable to me it was. And not from like some external reason. I didn't realize from my soul and my spirit how important it was for me to sing, to get my feelings out in that type of way. And yeah, when I hurt my voice, man, that I was concerned. I was really concerned. It was after the Jimmy Allen show. It was
Really?
If you check my Instagram, there's a video that I made literally the day after the show where I'm talking about like, if you do a show like this is how you can, collect your royalties, your performance royalties essentially.
Yeah.
Like go on the ASCAP
Mhm.
and do the performance stage, whatever,
Yeah.
and register the show.
Mhm.
I did a video on that, and you can hear it in my voice where it's just like that was really like the last time I sang well for like a year. Like I'm dead
Yeah.
serious. Like man, my voice was gone after that. So yeah.
Yeah, pandemic was scary.
It really was, man. I felt like even
Yeah.
when I got back out in public after the pandemic, I was like, it was awkward. Like I was such a social individual, but I I felt strange being in large social spaces.
Yeah.
And that was weird. I was like, man, this is what I like to do. I like to go out. I like to be around people and stuff,
Yeah.
and it was even more weird for me, I think, personally anyway. I'll just say personally it was weird for me because I was very like, I'll just say that I was not risk averse. There
Yeah.
were some people who were extremely risk averse, and there are some people who are not.
That's
And I
me.
think just in life in general, right? I'm not too
Yeah.
risk averse. I'm just like, oh, it's risky, and let's do it. Like I'm that kind of guy, and
Yeah.
that's just a personality trait. Period.
Yeah.
And I wasn't,
No, I'm the same way.
yeah, I wasn't expecting it to really affect me the way that it did, but it did, And I think
Yeah.
I just feel like if it hit me like that, then I can only imagine what it did to uh, other individuals who are really susceptible to
Hmm.
that type of social distancing, so to say. And
Yeah.
also just like what it does in terms of like your sense of identity. I know so many artists who were like doing well, bro, like doing well, and musicians who after the pandemic were like, yeah, I'm done making music. I'm done. I'm over. Or
Yeah.
they got a different job. They went into like corporate or finance or something else like
Hmm.
that. And they were just like, yeah, this is more stable. Or like I get to spend more time with my kids, whatever the reason was. And they just
Yeah.
kind of left the music business.
Yeah. No, yeah, it was a different time. I I went down to Carlsbad, is by San Diego, like maybe 20 minutes outside of San Diego, because LA County was so tight. I was just like, man, I'm going down south. Like I need to go further into Orange County because their laws were like very loose in comparison to like LA was like you couldn't even walk down the sidewalk by yourself without a mask. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it was like you get a ticket for that.
You get a ticket for that.
Yeah, if an officer sees you, he pull you over while you're walking on the side of the sidewalk and give you a ticket for not wearing a mask. And there could be nobody for 3 blocks. And there's like, nah, you can't, it was just that strict. And I was like, I hated wearing the shield or the mask and all that. I hated it with a passion. So I went down there because it was a little bit more normal. It was like, if you're inside or you like when you get down to like, you know, you go to a restaurant, you have it on until you sit down kind of thing.
Right.
Stuff like that, versus like LA expected you for you to like, have the mask and
Lift it
eat
up
and,
through. Yeah.
like, yeah. Yeah. So, most people were like at the smoothie spot with the straw, tucked under the mask. So it's like, me, I was like, I don't want to do this. So I went down there and I got a second apartment for like 6 months, because during the pandemic, people were just trying to get paid something for their rental property. So
Right.
I was like, I was at a 6 month spot, and I did, and I didn't do anything. The plan was I'm gonna go down here to do nothing. Like I plan on doing nothing, like with my time. I don't want to make money. I don't want to make music. I don't want to do anything. I was like, I worked so hard. I deserve a break. That's the way I took it. And when I got back at it was extremely scary because I remember I was so scared to even go to my studio. I didn't even go back to LA. Like I went to the Apple store and bought a completely brand new computer and just logged on and like started downloading stuff onto my computer. In fact, the one that I'm on right now. And I was like, let me see if I still got it. And I started fiddling around and I was like, yeah, I'm not back. Like
Right.
I was like, and I don't know if I'll be able to get back to where I was. It's kind of like a moment where I was like, I was so full-fledged into production and into everything that I was doing that I was like, man, I'm really beyond rusty. Like I feel like my creativity had not been exercised so much that I was like, my ideas kind of suck right now, So I kind of like was like, okay, I'm going to spend like 20, 40 hours a week, whatever I can manage. Because I still wanted to be lazy because I hadn't made music in like 4 months, 5 months. So I was like, I still want to be lazy. I just, 20 hours, 40 hours, I'll sit down and I'll make some music and like we'll see how it goes, And it probably took me like from like October 2020 to probably like February of 2021 to feel like, okay,
Back in the
I'm like
swing.
where I left off, I've picked back up. Like now I'm right back where I was. But it did suck because it felt like I was working to get back to something I already had.
Yeah, that's such a
So
mind.
mentally,
Yeah, like it
yeah,
sucks. It sucks. I go through that with
yeah,
piano. It's a love hate
yeah,
sometimes.
yeah. With piano, I've accepted that I'm washed up
It's not
from.
washed. It's not the same anymore. Yeah.
Because I could tell you this before, it'd be so fluid, like a Frank Sinatra piece, just, it's just fluid, it just, nothing was, uneven. That if somebody recorded me, they would have needed a compressor. It was so fluid. It almost sounded like MIDI dang there. And it's like now it's like, yeah, I'm washed. Like
He said, "Oh,
I need
let me go back on the roll on the piano roll and delete, slide that
yeah,
one over."
like it took me 3 minutes to play this, but I'm gonna spend a good 10 minutes editing this real quick.
Bro, that's the worst. Sometimes I have like the worst time trying to figure out. I'm like, should I just replay it? Like, should I just replay it or
Yeah.
should I edit it? Like, do you think sometimes you when you're editing, you're like, this is taking way longer than if I just replayed it?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually have like a small technique that I do for that. What I do is I'll have, where the when you press record, it just goes back to the same space every time you stop it. So literally I'll record back to back, like until I feel good in my mind, until I'm like, this was it. I'll just like record it back to back. And literally I'm just with one hand. Generally, if it's a full-fledged piano part, then I'm back and forth between my keyboard. But to like keep on undoing it and re-recording, but I'll be like super back to back and try to like force out um my like my intuition as a musician, like rely on that instinct instead of like fully being too like mental about it, you know what I
Right.
mean? So that's kind of like the way I do it. But when people see it, they're like, what are you doing, bro? It just sounds like you're like at a race. Because any mess up and it stop, and re-record like back to back to back. And because we get so good at key commands, it's like you're like, bro, there's no way you're playing anything good right now. Like
Right.
I'm like, no, 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 I got it, I got it. You know what I'm saying? But you figure like it still took 3 minutes. It just was now the take I actually wanted. You know what I mean?
Right.
So for me, it saves time, but it's definitely like people don't like. It's probably something you should do in your private time.
Yeah, don't do it while the artist is there. Or like,
Yeah, yeah, because I've done it in front of artists, and they're like, "Yeah, you're doing what, bro?" And I'm like, "I'm making music."
yeah, exactly. Making music.
Hey, yeah. So, but yeah, no, I figure I ask about the pandemic because I know that I'm sure it'll probably come up in other episodes, but I know for me, it's always curiosity to see how other creatives that were doing it prior then transitioned. And it's for me, I could say the biggest transition has been getting the creatives in my company acclimated to more sync related work, because most of the people that are in mine, they're hit makers, they bona fide, so big time songwriters, big time producers, so like some of them have written songs like "You Remind Me" for Usher. It's like, that's a big pen, for some of these projects, and not that sync doesn't deserve a big pen. It just feels like, because the visual tends to be more of the forerunner, to scale some of that back is a learning lesson too, so and they're incredible, but needless to say, I feel like we came in like people almost intimidated, like, you guys make massive songs. I don't know what you expect to get paid on this.
Right.
Like, so I think it was an interesting transition. And we, like anybody, we all try to stay flexible, but I think it was like an interesting transition because I think everybody carried over their competitive zeal to be able to like make music, so when they like asked for something, they would send us like the reels and stuff, the clips for the actual scenes and stuff, and they get it back in like 30 minutes, like, what the heck are you guys doing over there? It's like, man, we're trying
With
to
hype.
work,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm trying to do
yeah.
this. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's the same way with the artists. You're like building so much that it's like when they ask you for something, it's like, yo, here's 20,
Yep.
here's 10, here's this, here's, you're just constantly just giving them a lot of music. So we kind of took that approach and we're like, let's scale this back a little bit, like, and be a little bit more tactful, So I think it was a learning lesson because I think all of us had done sync, but it was more on the demand of the big records or on the demand of, okay, you work on this, we want to bring you in to do this kind of stuff or whatever. It's like specialized work versus saying, yeah, we're going to occupy whole pieces of companies with their rollouts. So it's been an interesting transition as well, to see how it plays out.
I think that
you
a
know
lot of us, yeah, we pivoted. I think a lot of us pivoted and
yeah.
decided like either you learned how to diversify more, and it was like
Mhm.
a great learning experience for you, you know, like both
Yeah.
intrinsic learning about yourself and your like your ability to persevere, right?
Yep.
And then also like your ability to say like I have more skills than one, and this is how they can be
Hmm.
applied different ways. So it's
Yeah.
interesting. I've seen a lot of people who have made it on the other side. In a strange way, they're better off because they
Yeah.
started using like extra muscles to do different things. And they're like, oh, I can do this and
Yeah.
this and this. And then when the performing came back, they were like, and I still got that, you know. So like I think that
Yeah.
for for some, you know, it turned out to be time to really like collect, recharge, really take a step back and see the landscape of everything and how we fit into it
Hmm.
and approach it with like with a little more tact. And
Yeah.
then you know, for others, I think that maybe you know I believe that everybody's in a place that they want to be because that's the place that they feel like they belong, right? Like that's the universe
Yeah.
working together for them. And so I think for artists who decided to take a step away, I hope rather that they feel like, you know what, that was the right decision for me and my life and for the things that
Mhm.
I want in my future too.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is I feel like as long as it's better for their destiny, I'm truly happy for them. Now for the ones that they're completely miserable, I feel like they should do everything in their power to,
To get back, they
get
should
back
listen
on
to
the
this
horse.
podcast and take down all the
Yeah,
information, all the gems that you gave
yeah.
for sure,
And drink some joy
and,
first while they do
and
it.
drink some joy bursts while they do it because they gotta be up.
Yeah,
It's work. They gotta put it in.
yeah. Yeah. And energy drinks have been the some of the driving force of long hours for this business. So they've been incredible to rely on. I could tell you this, I at this point should be investing stock in these companies. You know,
I
based off of
I
some of the
let
amount of.
I let Mr. Woodgate know. Like,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Tell him his central nervous system might be shot, but he's good to go. 'Cause some of them other ones on the market, you're like, wow, this thing got me wired up today. Like my central nervous system is gonna be shot at
Yo,
some
these
you
Johns,
know?
I'm not even look, no cap. I know that they're sponsoring this, so you know, take it as it is. But
Yeah,
these Johns right here, I'll show you the vanilla ice one just cause, you know, this is the one from the song that we wrote, right? But
yeah,
these Johns are banging. Like I prefer to drink these because all right, so you know how like the most energy drinks they have a little bit of that like taste to them, like it's got like
yeah,
a harsher bite. Now sometimes you want that flavor, you know, sometimes you want that
yeah,
flavor, but this is more of like
yep.
you know, like the flavored water that has bubbles in it.
Mhm.
It
Yeah,
tastes
like
like that.
LaCroix
It
and
tastes
stuff.
yeah, it tastes
Yeah,
like the flavored water with bubbles in it that's got caffeine. And I think when
nice.
you're looking for like a lighter refreshment, that's like
Mhm.
it hits that spot.
Yeah, yeah, because a lot of the other ones, they're really abrasive. They're super abrasive. Like I know because I've done quite a bit of events, and when you can tell when you give it to the crowd, it's like, yeah, this crowd just triple.
Through the
Like,
roof. They are
yeah, yeah,
up.
like almost immediately. It feels like 10 minutes ago. This was so much more organized. Like now it's just
Right.
chaos. You know what I mean?
Do 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 do
So
do do do. Yeah,
yeah,
like
them drops and everything hit different. You know what I'm saying? You're like, wow, this is crazy. Yeah, you're like, man, and the fireworks and everything, just the amount of energy one is exerting, and then having 10 to 100,000 people in front of you, like, this is should have never gave them this, you know?
gave him that crack.
Should have
Like,
never. Yeah, because you can tell because they're just like, especially when it's free, they're just like, the bottles, they're just like, you're like,
right.
man, this is bad. This is gonna be bad. So yeah, no, it's good to know that I had to get some because um yeah, I
I'll send
definitely
you a
love a
case.
good.
Shoot me the Addy. I'll send you
Yeah,
a case.
yeah, got you. Yeah, yeah. I love a good energy drink. I don't love the abrasiveness all the time.
Word.
And like you said, sometimes it's great. Sometimes it's like,
Yeah,
man, I want
sometimes that's what you're looking for. This is more of like actually it's crazy too because the caffeine on this because it's like caffeine that's from a natural source. It's from green tea extract. So it's
Yeah,
more of like a slow rise caffeine. Like
nice.
not not promoting the use of like Adderall or anything like that if you're not prescribed it, but like
Mhm.
let's say vitamins. Like
Yeah, yeah,
some vitamins or medicines are like time released.
yeah, yeah,
And so it's like, okay, let's get you to long. And then some are just like right here, right now. And
yeah,
that's why
yeah,
it really kind of matters what you're looking for, because the vibe that I get from Joy Burst is that it's more of like the longer, extended release type of caffeine hit
yeah, yeah,
than like the immediate like rush.
yeah, yeah. No, that's dope, and I think that that's important. Is it a healthier option in terms of
Yeah, it's got zeros down everything pretty much. But yeah, it's no
look,
sugar, no aspartame, no Ace K, all natural caffeine, 0 calories, all that good stuff. Yeah,
yeah,
200
yeah,
milligrams of caffeine from green tea extract per can. Yeah,
that's dope.
that's a lot of caffeine though.
That's
200
super dope.
milligrams is heavy.
Yeah, yeah, but with everything else, not being there, it probably balances.
Yeah. Well, bro, like I said, I appreciate you coming on. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
absolutely.